record. And I am recording. Good. Okay. We are recording. So phase one is definitely complete. Phase two, there still remains a couple more things to work with on some elements, one of which we'll work on today. And I don't know that we'll ever, I mean, we've wrapped up phase two, but we're never really fully done with phase two until we're done with all 5 phases, because things start to show up as they did in phase three. We discovered something that we needed to add additionally into CEDS, which we'll talk about today. But as far as phase three is concerned, the data model expansion, we have the draft models. I would never consider, again, it to be completely done until we kind of work our way through phases 4 and 5 and see that it actually works properly. And I'll kind of explain how that process is going to go and what's about to happen. But the data model expansion, as far as expanding the warehouse to meet what we believe to be a solution to the use cases, is complete. And I'll be showing you those draft models here in a second. Phase 4, data migration resource development, we're about to begin work on that, which is looking at how we move data between the models and work on some templates and things to move data into the IDS, move data into the warehouse, etc. And then phase 5 is actually building those reports that would sit on top of that data warehouse and actually building the reports that are part of the use cases from number 1. So we are past the halfway point, very aggressively moving towards the end. And just a quick overview of what took place in May, in case you weren't a part of that or able to be a part of what happened. We did have a data modeling workshop. So May 11th, we kicked that off. And then we had some office hours in between that actually turned into modeling hours, where we were doing a lot of the modeling work. And that May 13th or 18th. And then May 24th and 5th, we did some more modeling on those, and then finally wrapped up on May 27th. So very busy May working on the actual expansion of the warehouse model. The work that's completed, there is a draft data model complete for the adult education and for the special education. There's still a slight amount of work that we want to do on the student level poverty measure. There's a few things we need as far as the elements are concerned, but it's fairly close, and I'll be posting that shortly. But I want to show you where I have the other 2 models posted. So if you head into the Common Education Data Standards community site, which used to be ceds.grad360.org. Just a quick FYI that's changing the end of June to ceds.communities.ed.gov. So if you're in any of the other communities, SLDS, EdFax communities, CID, etc., those are all changing from grad360 to communities.ed.gov. And you'll see an alert across the top of all of those letting you know that any links or whatever you have to modify those over from grad360 to communities.ed.gov. The links pretty much stay the same. It's just the grad360.org part changes to communities.ed.gov. So be aware of that, but that's where we are, is in the community site. And if we jump into the data warehouse expansion project, moving a little slowly here. There we go. Data warehouse expansion project. All right, down at the bottom, we have a workspace. And so if you were to jump into there, you're going to be able to get the draft models either in Visio. If you happen to have Visio installed, it's a little easier to work with. You can also make edits and things if you want as you're reviewing it. Otherwise, we do have it available in PDF as well, where you can take a look at those models. So one of the things we want you to do is just to continue to review those for those that were part of the workshop, to continue to look at those models that are available there and provide feedback. If you were, can you put the URL in the chat? Good call. And pay attention to the chat. There we go. That'll take you into the data warehouse expansion workspace. If you come into the or into the that community and you are not able to see the workspace down here at the bottom, it's because you have not logged in. So you would need to log in. If you can't log in, you would need to request membership, and we can get you access then to that. Otherwise, you're going to come in and just see a thing, and there'll be a place to request membership over here on the right side where it says request to join. Hey, 3 pending requests. Why don't we just take care of that in case you're on this call? That would be useful. Just in the off chance. All right, very good. Back over into here. In case you are one of the individuals on the call, you need to be able to access it. And that's what I'll get, a pending request note. So those are in there. We'll want you to take and look at those draft models and provide any feedback. You can email me directly as far as that's concerned. Just taking a look at the different use cases that we have and the documentation there, and then comparing that with the models themselves or anything that may come up. So let's take a quick look at those models themselves, just so that you have kind of an idea of what's going on. This is the special education one. And the grain that we're looking at in the special education one for the fact tables is that we're looking at putting in one record per school year per a particular count date for the school of enrollment by responsible school type. That's a unique one in case if you weren't part of the work group or the workshop, there's enrollments in schools, but in many states receive multiple enrollments from multiple schools, even on the same date. So a student may be enrolled in 2 different schools at the same time. There's responsibility levels. And so CEDS has responsible elements related to who's responsible for what. And so including that responsible school type. Then there's a school enrollment entry and exit date so that you can pull based off of a particular date. The student itself, I'm not seeing the model if you are showing that. Is anyone else not seeing the model?
Nope, we're seeing the CEDS website page, Dwayne.
Well, that's interesting. Let's just go and do a quick stop share and reshare. Screen share 2. How about now?
I don't see anything yet. Just a black screen.
It says you started sharing your screen, but it's black.
What do you see now?
The same.
Still just the black screen.
Well,
Yeah, it still says you have started sharing your screen.
let's quit some things here. And we'll do another stop share. This is going to be fun. I may just tell you where it's located and have you kind of take a look at it. And I'm sharing the wrong screen now. So share screen 2.
Still not seeing it.
See the PowerPoint?
Nope.
Wow. Okay, this is fun.
There we see the PowerPoint.
Yeah, it's better.
Well, I'm going to then hang out there. Golly, but the rest of this, I need to show you something. Let's just go through the PowerPoint and whatever it is that's taking up bandwidth, maybe we'll get some luck there that it'll go away. I don't know. That's why I'm called in on my phone too. So we'll go over those draft models if we can't. Those, as I mentioned, I think you saw that where they're located inside of the data warehouse expansion project. You can just scroll down to the workspace and take a look at those. And what we're really looking for is to look at that grain. Does that work? Look at the model. Do you have any questions or concerns or thoughts around the model itself? And to provide some of that feedback to us. We're certainly not going to finalize it anytime soon in the next week or so. So you have a few weeks that you could take a look at that. We are, let me skip forward to the next slide here. Just kind of give you an update of what's going to happen now. So we have the update meetings regularly scheduled. And at any point too, if you want to meet or if you have questions or you'd like to go through the model separately, if you weren't part of the workshop and you're interested in taking a look at that model in a deeper dive, we're happy to have a separate meeting with you to go over it, to discuss it. That's at office hours. So anytime you want to meet, just feel free to reach out to me and we can meet separately. But the goals for June and July, there's a couple things, really there's quite a few things we want to complete in the next 2 months. So the first one is to complete metadata tagging for the warehouse and then also the staging environment that you haven't seen yet, but that's part of an existing set of standards that we have. And the metadata tagging is basically this. We want to have for every element in the warehouse, we want the CEDS global ID associated with it. We want the element name associated with it, a URL, just like we have in the IDS, which I'd really like to be able to pull up to show you. But in the IDS, if you were to look at the extended properties of any column in there, you're going to find the global ID and the element associated with it. We don't have that for the warehouse yet. We also don't have that for a staging environment that we use for moving data into the various different models. And so what we're going to do is complete that metadata tagging. Jason Young from DoubleLine has actually done extensive work on that already. And so I'm going to be grabbing the work he's done and continue working on that. But ultimately, what we want to be able to do is provide that seamless look at the data using the extended properties and using metadata. So if you were to go into CEDS and build a connection, which is the use case like we did with these, we listed exactly the elements that we needed in that connection, those CEDS elements that we needed for that. Those elements have associated global IDs with them. They also have associated term IDs that give context with that. So if you were to build that use case, now I can show you, if all of this is tagged, exactly where it lives inside the IDS, and I can show you exactly where it lives inside the warehouse and the associated tables inside of the warehouse. If you were to use a CEDS align mapping and take your source data and say, well, here's where our source data lives, and you build an align map in there, you've now linked your data to the CEDS IDs by doing that. And so from that work, we can then create a spreadsheet that basically shows you, here's your source data, here's the global ID and term ID for that source data, here's where it would live in the staging environment, here's how you would move it into the IDS, and here's where it would live in the data warehouse. So we can build for you that technical documentation utilizing all the various different CEDS resources just by completing the metadata tagging on this warehouse and these structures. So that's one thing for June and July to complete that we'll be working on internally. Yeah, so that's one. The other two, create pull requests for the data warehouse and the IDS. And so as I mentioned, you have access to that draft in that workspace. You have access to the draft data models. We're not going to do that anytime soon, not in the next week or two, but probably closer into July, we're going to be creating a pull request inside of the GitHub site on the open source community site, where you can take a look at this is the actual coding changes we are planning on making to the data warehouse and the IDS. Even at that point, we'll be looking for feedback as well, but those pull requests will be coming in, looking at, we're about to update the version of these different models. Any kind of feedback you have would be appreciated now, or even after we create the pull requests for that. So those will be coming probably in July. Very shortly in June, we're going to begin phase 4, and that's data migration resource development. So there are different methods for loading CEDS. One is to load the IDS. So states that utilize the normalized structure, the transactional model of the IDS, we're going to have a migration resource that will create a staging process for loading these data that we have now added. So the adult education data, any additional special education elements, there'll be a staging process for that, and then the ability with scripts to move from the staging into the IDS, and then move from the IDS into the data warehouse. So all of those scripts are going to be created in the months of June and July. We'll also be looking at direct loading of the warehouse from source data as well, so that you would bypass the IDS if you're not going to use it for transactional purposes to direct load to the data warehouse itself. So all of those different templates and scripts that would allow you to utilize those resources, we'll be working on those in June and July. And then finally, we'll also be doing a little bit of initial testing of phase 5. So can we pull some data? We pull these reports out of the structure as it is. So we'll be using, our test environments to create the model itself, and then build some reports off of that to get a gut check to say, do these pull the reports? Are we missing anything here? Or can we actually build these reports and do some initial testing on that? And if we feel comfortable with that, then we'll create those pull requests, and then ultimately be able to move into phase 4 and 5, where we build the real reports themselves, get and offer that code up, which will be the end of the whole project, where you can run any of these reports in your own environment if you have the warehouse installed. So that's what we're looking at in June and July. Quite a bit to be done. A lot of this really is going to kind of be internal to the CEDS team. Besides metadata tagging, we may be reaching out if we have some busy work that we need to get done there, because there's a lot of work around the metadata tagging that we might need some assistance with. But the rest of it, probably working with Colorado and Michigan directly, and then doing a lot of that stuff just kind of internally the next 2 months, and then keeping you aware of what's going on. So for you all on the call, what we really need is taking a look at those models and doing any kind of gut check, anything at all that you feel might not quite be right, to let us know what you see there. That's our big ask over the next month, is to look at those models themselves that we released. Questions so far? And then I'm going to attempt to share again something else. Pull up the chat and see if I got anything. Okay. Feel free to drop in the chat if you have any questions, or come off mute. But the one additional thing that I wanted to work on in this update meeting is we identified a new element that we don't have in CEDS, and it appears to be fairly common. So, and that has to do with the post-secondary credential. Golly, I wish I could share. I'm going to attempt to share again, and we're just going to see what happens, because it's kind of critical. Did anything else come over into your screen?
We can see it.
You can see it? Well, I'm not
Yes.
changing. We're going to stay with this document because it's probably got enough in there. So what we're looking at here is there is essentially one of the credential indicators that for adult education is that they obtained a post-secondary credential during participation or within 1 year of exit. So basically, did they get a credential, a recognized credential? And I had noted that there's the word recognized there in one of the other definitions. So this comes out of the NRS reporting guide, which is National Reporting System. So it's part of WIOA. And so it's essentially looking, just did they get a post-secondary credential? Now, we have in CEDS types of credentials. You got a bachelor's degree, you got a master's degree, you got a certificate, you got a whatever. There's like, hundreds of credential types that you could probably play with inside of CEDS. The problem is, in many states, they're doing a survey and they may not know the type of credential. So one of the survey recommendations that they give here is, did you receive any diplomas, certificates, or degrees, such as secondary from passing, GED, or a post-secondary credential or certificate while you were enrolled or since you took the class? So yes, let's just say they answer the question yes. Then it moves down. What type of diploma or certificate did you receive? So this survey goes out to lots of people, hundreds, thousands of students. If they can't get access to the actual credentials from higher ed, even if they can, sometimes they only get back a yes, they got a credential. It's that second answer there, a post-secondary credential or certificate necessary to obtain employment or advance within an industry or occupation. It's basically a post-secondary credential. We don't know what kind. We don't know. If they answer associates, bachelor's, other, and provide something, yes, but if they don't, just a credential, and rather generic. So curious we need to create something here. Well, I'm not exactly certain where to put it or what to create, because it's going to kind of separate this one out. So we already have obtained a secondary school diploma. We have that. We can know that one in CEDS. We already know employed while enrolled, employed after exit. So we have an element of that nature. We also have an element that indicates enrolled in post-secondary. So we know they enrolled in post-secondary, and that's a specific element. We just don't have anything related to this. So thoughts on just creating a separate element of what that would look like?
Are you going to separate diploma from GED?
We can separate diploma from GED. We also have the ability to just, through the use of the diploma credential award, like it just becomes a yes, no, that you got one. But we do separate diploma from GED within CEDS already. Is that the question, or are you needing it to be together?
No, I mean, they're different courses of study. So,
Right.
We don't collect that here yet in Michigan, at least not through CEPI. But it would be nice to be able to identify those two things. I don't know what
The diploma
Colorado
versus
thinks.
The diploma versus the GED, that's the two things.
Say that one more time.
Are you saying the diploma and the GED, that's the two things?
I would say the diploma is one thing, the GED is another, and then obtaining a post-secondary credential beyond high school is the third. And I don't know to what level of granularity you want to go with that one.
Yeah, the third one the problem we have is that CEDS has granularity, which is good. And we built within the warehouse already, there's the ability to have academic awards related to post-secondary. So bachelor's, master's, certificates, that sort of thing is all in there. The problem we have is that we have only granularity and not non-granularity. And the way this is collected by many states, they don't know the certificate or credential. They just know that they obtained a credential.
So it could be a yes/no thing, or
Right.
a yes/no thing with a optional additional detail.
Right. So I'm curious how we would model, but I'm curious what other states have around this. Do they just have like this survey? This is how they store it. Post-secondary credential or certificate necessary to obtain employment or advance within industry or occupation. That's the definition, and it's a yes/no. Right? Is that how states store that presently when they don't know the actual credential?
Yeah, this is Denise in Colorado. We just get the yes/no from higher ed.
Okay. And do you know if you call it like post-secondary credential or what you call it?
I have to go back and look. I mean, we don't have it
Fine.
stored yet. Yeah.
Well, yeah, right. You don't have it stored yet. Exactly. That's part of why we're doing this. You're going to call it probably whatever we call it.
Wayne, is
And
it possible that this could be modeled that a credential was received and we just don't have any other metadata? So it's the name of the credential is unknown and
can we I can't type and talk, so sorry about that. Can we know that the credential received was post-secondary? So we'd have to add additional metadata, would have to know some metadata, and that the credential itself is post-secondary.
yeah, I'd have to look at how we have that exactly in the IDS, but it seems like we have that as it's an association between a person and a credential, and that we could put as much or as little metadata on that credential as we want. And one of those things could be at what level.
I think personally, I would think that we would still want to keep secondary separated from post-secondary.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So basically, that's part of the metadata. A credential is received. You can receive a credential in secondary, and you can receive a credential in post-secondary, or you can receive a credential that is a secondary credential. I don't even know if those exist, actually. You can receive one. Probably they do. I don't know. And I also wonder if, I guess it'd be post-secondary credential. That would be the metadata around it. Like if the certificate or the credential you received, is it a result of you being in post-secondary, or is it actually a post-secondary credential or certificate? Like, I'm in post-secondary and I received this credential. Does that make it a post-secondary credential?
Well,
And I may be overthinking it.
yeah, and in the IDS, we have credentials, the ability to tag a credential as a post-secondary or some other level.
So we already have that functionality in the IDS.
Yeah, I'll just need to look closer at if there's anything that would restrict us from using it in this way. And
Okay.
then we would need another element, but or a change to the IDS, like having a required field that for something that we don't know the answer to.
Right. we don't really know, but we know there's a credential, but we don't know anything about it, except it's post-secondary. And we know something. We know it's post-secondary.
Yeah.
Okay, so then probably I'll look through the credential domain. Anyone else on this one? I think it was really just the only, we put a placeholder. I won't go try to show anything else. We put a placeholder for this one. I believe we called it credential indicator type or something along those lines. So you'll see that in there, but it's really a placeholder for us to just say we don't know exactly how we're going to model this, but somehow we have to model the fact that they get a post-secondary credential. We had originally modeled it, which was what the actual credential was, but as we discovered going through this, that they may not know the actual credential itself. So we had to remodel that one to look at a generic way to do this, not generic, but at a way to do that's common. Everyone, is collecting it this way. And then we have an additional fact table if you want to collect the detail. Yeah, go ahead.
You're connecting the credential to a facility or an educational provider, correct?
At this point, no, we can. I think if you connect it to the actual provider, you probably will know the credential, but even still, what we're modeling here, at least for the use case, we don't really care where they got the credential, but that they did get the credential.
You can receive, as a secondary student, you can receive a post-secondary degree or certificate, and vice versa. As a post-secondary student, you could receive a secondary certificate, the diploma or the GED. Does that,
Yeah, I think in this, go ahead, keep going.
does that make sense, or am I off?
Yeah, in this instance, the way the use case, the table would be modeled, it won't matter. So if they were a post-secondary student and they received a second, well, they probably would be a post receiving, well, they definitely could do that. An adult education student receiving a secondary, so they get a diploma, and that's allowed for. So we know that one. In this particular instance, it's looking at, here we have a student, they're co-participating, they're co-enrolled in adult education and a post-secondary program. And the question is, did they get something from that, either while they were co-enrolled in those or after, within 1 year? And so we would end up with this. That's why the third question, when did you receive that certificate, diploma, degree? And it's going to be looking for, we got it on this date. So did that occur within 1 year of exit? Is what that's looking for. So we have it separated where it could be just the examples and scenarios you said. And when you go to pull the report, you're going to be looking based off of that field you need to fill in. There's one little cell, and this particular cell wants to know, did they receive a post-secondary credential within 1 year of exit or during enrollment? And that's all it cares about. And were they co-enrolled in post-secondary and adult education? I think we haven't modeled the way that you're saying it to do both. So we're safe there, probably. That's a good question, though. So we have that.
I guess I was
flexibility.
thinking a little bit beyond adult education students, because I was thinking about a under 18 high school student who is enrolled in an early middle college program or a career tech program and gets a certificate or completes an associate's degree prior to, along with graduating with a high school diploma. So that would be a secondary certification or certificate received in a post-secondary certificate received in a secondary environment, and you're not counting those as received within a year of graduation.
So those, for this use case, I mean, those would go over in probably a different fact table entirely related to post-secondary or related to K-12. In this instance, the fact table is specifically looking at adult education students only. So those kids wouldn't even make their way into this table because they are secondary students not participating in adult education. So I think where they would just be, I mean, they wouldn't even be part of the use case, but there are K-12 tables that can show earning that particular degree or credential while in K-12. There's other tables for that. I think some that you guys have designed actually that Nathan's worked on with some of your developers. So I think you're good there. I think in this instance, these are just adult education students only.
I guess I just kind of have to remind myself to think of it in smaller buckets.
Which is very hard for me too. I come from this normalized structure mind. Very much the IDS model was what I sort of grew up understanding and knowing, and then the warehouse architecture is, for me, is like, well, we can include this too. Why are we including that? That's not part of the use case. Okay, all right, but all right. So it's hard for me to grasp some of the warehouse modeling techniques, but the point of the warehouse is not to store all the data we could possibly store for everything. It's to get data out, and so there's different use cases, and I'm learning that. I'm getting there. But yeah, different use cases, and so you build a different fact table. You reuse fact tables, you know, if the grain is similar or is the same as what you're looking for some kind of other question that you have, but otherwise you build another fact table. Yeah, it's hard for me too. All right, I think we'll go there then probably for now. If you do have additional things as far as how you model this one question from your state, that survey question, if you're just doing a yes, no, it'd be nice to know. If you're doing anything beyond a yes, no, I would really like to know that. If you're doing a yes, no, that's probably the path we're kind of looking at. But anything beyond that yes, no, where you don't know the degree or credential, but you're doing something else besides a yes, no for that, that would be very useful information as we look at how we're going to handle adding that additional element in so that we can capture that. Looking for the chat. Any other questions?
Hey, Dwayne, Tracy from Maine.
Yep.
I may have not heard, but for those two, for secondary and post-secondary, are you thinking about adding a date attained for both, or just a date attained?
There would be, yeah, and this survey, the way it looked is not is not done well for actual data collection. This is just part of that document they have.
Mhm.
We would have the date for each.
Okay.
So we'd be looking at the date the post-secondary credential was obtained, the date the secondary school diploma was attained, the date the associate's degree, the date, if they happen to be more than one, the actual date itself
All right.
with the association. So yeah, good question. Very good question. Other questions?
Are we trying to decide if we need another fact table with this information, since it seems to be outside the grain that we've modeled?
I think we just need the other element. I think we're okay with the fact table. We just haven't, when we built it originally, we had associate's degree, bachelor's degree, and various types of certificates and credentials, all kinds that you could think of. But then as we started to look during the workshop, it became apparent that not the way that a lot of states, most states, maybe all states, get some of the data is that they don't get associate's degree or bachelor's degree. They may only just know that a credential was obtained and they don't know what it is. So we just were stuck with, well, we can't model it that way if a lot of the data coming in is just going to be a credential, an unknown, know enough that it's post-secondary, but know nothing else about the credential or certificate. So that
is it really a credential that we're collecting, or is it a completion of a area of study?
No, it would be a credential, which could be a completion of the area of study. So, but it's still considered like an actual credential. So they didn't finish and receive some type of degree or certificate or credit, like they're getting something next to their name, or if they've checked some kind of, they've completed. Because they're in the adult education program, they're co-enrolled in post-secondary, so they're doing work, but did they finish something enough to obtain something for at a post-secondary level, which could be, I believe it could be like, if it was, I don't know the haircutting one, like if you're just, you know, for haircutting or a mechanic or IT, you receive some kind of certificate or some kind of a credential that would allow you to obtain employment, or you're advancing within industry or an occupation, like it says there. Something was given to you that shows finishing. And it could be during, it could also be after. So right, they're in the adult education program, they actually finished the adult education program, and then within 1 year of leaving, now they've obtained that credential or certificate. So it doesn't even have to be in the actual program itself. It can be afterwards. Looking basically to say, did the student advance? Did it help? I mean, that's really the question, right? Did this adult education program help move them towards employment or furthering their credentials or careers?
So Dwayne, it might be that if I'm looking at one view of the IDS, and it might be that we have the elements, and it's a matter of transforming how they're represented in the IDS into a flag or aggregate in the star schema of the data warehouse. So it might not require a new element to be defined in CEDS, as long as we can define a way of deriving the value from the more granular data. But I'll need to look into more of the details, like if required fields restrict it, or if we don't have the right labels on. So we have a credential definition table and a credential award table that's linked to a person. So if we don't have the right labels on credential definition, that tells us that it's post-secondary or not post-secondary. Or if there are required fields that, like if the name of the credential for credential definition is required and we're not going to know that, there would need to be a way of You know, what's the conventions? Do you put unknown as the name? Something like that.
You're not entirely liking that, but yeah.
Well,
Never like to fill in data, but yeah.
Well, I'm just saying that I need to look into if there are restrictions, or if we could use, what are the implications before we decide one way or the other, whether to create a new element.
Okay. So let's explore that some more from the credential side. And then anyone else, again, if you're just using yes, no, great. We're going to assume you're just using yes, no, but if you have anything beyond yes, no, where you're collecting, you would want to know that, because that's what that's how we're looking at how, even with a credential domain, it's post-secondary and a credential. That's it. We know it. And there's the date. All right, any other comments or questions? Where is that? Okay, so that's really all I needed there. So as I mentioned, looking at those draft models and just making sure to vet those are going to be the big thing for the month of June that we're looking from the stakeholder community. We're obviously going to continue to vet them ourselves as we start to write out the resource migrations and moving data, moving some test data through to make sure everything's working properly. But it's still good to have more eyes on it. I know we've had a lot of eyes on it over the course of May, but still, the more the merrier to take a look at that and help us to make sure that those are models going forward that are going to work. Any questions? Last chance. All right. Thanks, everyone. That's all we need to know for today. You'll start to see some resources and things coming out. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Please,
Wayne.
Wayne, are you going to post this recording on?
I will, because I recorded it. I'll post on the Data Warehouse Expansion Project. I'll put it in there on that page.
Now by Celine Dion on YouTube.
Okay, thanks.
Sure thing.
Dwayne, this is Denise in Colorado. Can you hang on for a second?
Say that again.
Can you hang on for a second?
Yep, I can hang on. I'm going to